Shalom, everybody. Welcome to this week's journey through Torah. We're getting closer to ending the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Devarim, the book of words. These are the words that Moshe was expounding and teaching to the people of Israel. Don't forget the emphasis of this book. As we were getting into it, we talked about how the emphasis here is the next generation that's getting ready to go into the land. They've only known the wilderness for the most part. Okay, now at this point, there are some among them that could have been alive when the first generation died off. But remember, those aged 20 and younger are the ones who are now standing here 40 years later. Okay, so if you can imagine, if you will, aside from Caleb and Yehoshua, everybody else in the nation is under 60. And they're getting ready to go into the land. So this is kind of what we're looking at. Most of this generation didn't experience a lot that they had in Mitzrayim. And now all they know is the wilderness. And life is going to change drastically when they get into the land. So Moshe is giving them instruction on what Yahweh desired for them, that when you go into the land that Yahweh has promised you, you're going to increase, you're going to multiply, you're going to have great things, but you have to learn to take care of them. You have to learn to work the land. You have to learn to bring the goodness of Yahweh before, into the temple. All this is things that they're going to have to learn. Life is going to change drastically. You're not going to be able to look to the center of the camp and be able to see the cloud and the fire, the pillar of fire. You're not going to be able to see all that now. Life is going to change drastically. The manna is going to stop. So now what do they do when they get into the land? Now they have to learn to walk in faith. They have to learn to trust Yahweh. They have to learn to rely on him without actually seeing that presence of him. They have to learn that Yahweh is still with them, even though they're not seeing the pillar of fire and the cloud, everything right there in their backyard. They have to learn Yahweh is still with them, but they have to carry his presence with them wherever they go. They do so by walking in his ways, by listening to his voice, and the times when they gather back in at a central location to reaffirm the covenant that they stand and walk in, and to hear the words of Yahweh, all these things coming together in a place of relationship, of honoring Yah, honoring one another, and learning how to dwell in the land that Yahweh has given them. Okay, so there's another thing that has to happen. Well, we're going to talk about this briefly here, probably next week, a little more so, but each generation has to experience the presence of Yahweh. We cannot rely on somebody else's experiences. Now, we should be able to hear what Yahweh has done for our forefathers, done for those that have gone before us, be encouraged in that, to believe and trust Yahweh because of the things that he has done. But for that personal experience, we all need that. Okay, remember when the words of Yahweh were received from the people of Israel, they were received as a nation, although he was speaking to each and every individual within that. So there is a personal necessity for us to walk in the word, but it's also as a national obligation. Okay, so all of this tying in together, like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that probably next week. But today we're going to find out about who was there, who has this entering into covenant, and what are they going to have to do here? What happens next, right? All right, so we're going to get into that. So let's start off in Deuteronomy 29 and verse 9. It says, "You were standing, all of you, before Adonai your God." That's the first part of verse 9. The word there for standing is Nitzavim. It says you were standing. Most often when you see the word stand, it's the word amad. Okay, omdim, amad. Amad means to stand. Nitzavim, it also means stand. It also means to establish something that's firm. There's a purpose here to one that is standing, and as we see that as we go through other places in Scripture as well, which I have some references here for you as well. But before we get there, I want to break the word down for you really quick. If we look in the pictographs for the Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew, you see here a nun, a tzadik, and a bet. What this represents is the seed or life and the righteous and the house. Okay, so we have the life, the righteous, and the house. So we have our life of those who are righteous is dwelling in his house. As they're going into the land, understand this is a place that he has called for us to dwell. He has given us this place of coming in together and standing with one another as we stand with him. And we have to have that experience there to carry it forward with us. You cannot carry something with you that you don't have a personal relationship with. Okay, so Yahweh is saying he wants us to experience himself, and we are all standing. We're standing as individuals before Yahweh, but we're also standing as a people before Yahweh. We're standing as a nation before him. Okay, so Nitzavim, what's this other times that this word was used? I only cover a couple places here, but some other places this was used is in Genesis 18, 1 and 2. Where it says, Adonai appeared to him, this Avram, at Mamre's large trees while he was sitting at the entrance of the tent during the heat of the day. And when he lifted up his eyes to see, suddenly 3 men were standing right by him. When he saw them, he ran from the entrance of his tent to meet them, and he bowed down to the ground. Again, we have here of Avram, he's at the entrance of his tent. You know, this was after his Brit Milah, after his circumcision. And he looks up and it says Adonai appeared there, and he looks up and he sees these 3 men standing there. So they're standing there, but it's kind of like they're there for a reason. Okay, there's a purpose to them standing, and that's what we see here. Okay, it's standing. You could even use in the phrase like to make a stand, right? This was how this would kind of tie in there. Let's look again, Genesis 28. 12 and 13 of Jacob's ladder or staircase, depending on how you define that word. And so he laid down and he dreamed, and all of a sudden there was a stairway set up on the earth with its top reaching to the heavens, and behold, angels of God going up and down on it. Surprisingly, Adonai was standing on top of it, and he said, I am Adonai, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzhak. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your seed. So again, he's standing, but there is a purpose here. It's not just saying he was there. It makes a point. He was standing there. Where else do we see this? Isaiah 3:13. Adonai arises to contend a case. He stands to judge the people. And in Psalm 82:1 says Elohim stands in the divine assembly. And continuing in Psalms 82, he's standing with the purpose of judgment. So again, there's a purpose here when he's calling us to stand. And here we're called to stand with a purpose. And it's not really judgment. It's entering into covenant, which we'll get to that in just a minute. Okay. First, let's address who is to stand. So let's go back and let's read that passage, Deuteronomy 29, 9 through 14. It says, you are standing today, all of you, before Adonai your God, the heads of your tribes, your elders, your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your wives, the outsider within your camp, from your woodchopper to your water carrier. Each of you is to cross over into the covenant of Adonai your God that he is cutting with you today, and into his oath. Verse 12. This is in order to confirm you today as his people. So he will be your God, just as he promised you, and just as he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov. Not with you alone am I cutting this covenant and this oath, but with whomever is standing here with us today before Adonai our God, and with whomever is not here with us today. Okay, so when we see this, who is addressed to stand here with them? Okay, well, he makes a point. He says, all of you. So what does it mean when he says all of you? All of you. No one is exempt. The entire camp, everyone that's there. Okay, those of natural born descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, those naturally born of the 12 tribes, and those who were standing with them, those who came out with them from Mitzrayim, those that were gathered in along the way, those from other nations and other people that have come in to join with Israel, all together are standing at the mountain at this point. Okay, now I know this isn't Sinai, but they're still standing here with Moshe as he's directing them, and he's about to equip them and explain to them what's going on with their life. Okay, so it says all of you are standing here today, but then it says something else. It's not just all of you that are standing here today, but for all who are not here today as well. In other words, it's all of you here today that are saying this, affirming covenant here. Okay, this is what we're talking about. We're reaffirming covenant. Reaffirming the promises that were given and dedicating ourselves to them as this generation. But as well, these words are not just for us. They are for us who are here today and for those who are not here yet. Okay, for those who are not here as well. So in other words, ongoing in perpetuity, going on and on and on from generation to generation to generation, these words will go forever. And each generation has to have the responsibility to accept these upon themselves. So let me paraphrase it this way. Who is standing here to receive these words and to determine if they want to accept them or not? Whosoever will. Whoever will. Whoever comes to Yahweh must come to this point of determining a place of covenant. We will enter into covenant with him, knowing my life is not my own, and I will walk in his ways, or not. So we are all standing here today, a place of decision. We have to make our life from this point forward. Who are we going to dedicate our life to? All of us come to that point, that crossroads, so to speak. Okay. So who are standing? All of us that are here and the next generation. Okay. But not just the next generation, from generation to generation to generation, all the way to the last generation. Look, in Deuteronomy 29:21, it says the following generation, your children who rise up after you, and the foreigner who comes from a distant land. So when it says the following generation, this is the word Hador Ha'acharon. Okay, Hador Ha'acharon. This word, Hador, is generation, and Ha'acharon is the last generation, the last days, the last generation. And then as well as we see a point here of the nations coming in. So all the way down, these words here for us here today, and for those all the way down to the last generation, and included in that, by the way, are those from other nations, foreigners, those from other nations who have decided to come in and to affirm a place of covenant among you as well. Let's back up a minute. Let's take a look at something in Deuteronomy 5:1-3. Moshe called to all Israel and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the ordinances that I'm speaking in your hearing today, learn them and make sure to do them. Adonai our God cut a covenant with us in Horeb, not with our fathers, as Adonai cut this covenant, but with us, all of us alive here today. So again, what we're looking at here is that, okay, when he made the covenant at Sinai, that was for that generation and for the following generations as well. But what Moshe is saying is that you guys are here. This is for you. You have to do this. You have to affirm this covenant. This covenant was made with Yahweh. Will you walk in it? Right? So what was the purpose of standing in today? To enter a place of covenant. Okay, to affirm that. Yahweh had already declared his covenant to them, but now this is the next generation who is accepting these terms and saying we will walk in them, so to speak, right? Deuteronomy 29:9-14, again. So you are standing today, all of you, before Adonai your God, the heads of your tribes, your elders, your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your wives, the outsider within your camp, the wood chopper to your wire carrier. Each one is to cross over. See that? Each of you is to cross over into covenant of Adonai your God that he is cutting with you today and into this oath. Verse 12. This is in order to confirm you today as his people. So he will be your God, just as he promised you, and just as you swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Now with you alone I am cutting this covenant and this oath, but with whomever is standing with us today before Adonai God, and whoever is not here with us today. So the point here is crossing over into covenant. They're going into the land. This was a promise that was fulfilled to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And it says, not with you alone, but all who stand with us. Okay, not with you alone, not just Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, but all who stand with us. In other words, each of you that are here and that are standing with Israel and who serving the God of Israel are in a place of covenant with Israel. Say, no, we're in covenant with Yahweh. Absolutely. But understand, he is covenant with Israel. So we're all standing together as one people. Okay, not Israel and the nations. No, we're standing together as one people. Israel, even though we may have come from the nations, we are brought in to be a people alongside with the people of Israel. Yahweh has never replaced Israel, and he's brought his people to be in part of a covenant with and alongside Israel. Romans 11:17-18 talks about being grafted in. If you are grafted into the tree, you can't say you're the tree. You're a branch of the tree, and so we are grafted in to be a part with Israel. Galatians 3 says this, verse 8 says, so the scripture foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith, preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, in you shall all the nations be blessed. So v'nivrahu is the word he says, all the nations be left, but the root of this word is mavrik, which could also mean to graft. So we see through you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed or grafted into a place or position of covenant. Remember, Abraham was not a Jew. Okay? Abraham, he crossed over in his faith. He was called Hebrew. Okay? He crossed over into his faith and he served the one true God, who became known as the God of Israel. because we have Abraham gave birth to Yitzhak, to Yaakov. Yaakov became Israel, changed his name to Israel. Yahweh did. And then he had 12 sons who had the tribes. So these were the tribes of Israel. And then at Sinai, it says they saw the God of Israel. And this was the first time this phrase was used. So we're talking about Israel and all those brought in with him. Because remember, when Abraham is the example, I mean, he is the father of the faith, right? I mean, but when he came to faith, there were others that were in his household who were not descendants of him, okay? But they were in his household who affirmed covenant and entered into covenant with the God of Abraham, all right? So that gives us a picture. That shows us some things. Continuing on in Galatians 3, we read that Yeshua did what he did for a purpose. I mean, obviously to redeem us, right? But there's more than that, okay? And we know that that's a big one, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely, that's a big one. But by doing so, there's more that's happening here than we often attribute to what's happening here. Okay, Galatians 3:13-15 says, Messiah redeemed us from the curse of the Torah, having become a curse for us, for it has been written, curses everyone having been hung on a tree. And by the way, the curse of the Torah is not the Torah. The curse of the Torah is if you sin, you die, right? That the blessing of Abraham might come on the nations through Messiah Yeshua, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. Remember this, I speak as a man, even though it be a man's covenant, yet if it is confirmed, no man can reject it or change anything in it. And Yahweh confirmed this covenant with Abraham. Okay, so Yeshua did what he did so that the blessing that was given to Abraham could come to the nations. And go back to Galatians 3:29. So also, if you belong to the Messiah, you are the seed of Abraham and heirs according to the promise. What promise? The promise Yahweh gave to Abraham, what was just mentioned earlier in that chapter. Okay, and even being called, well, okay, but I'm from the nations. Again, if you come to Yahweh, you're no longer from the nations. You are a child of Yahweh in covenant with a people who are in covenant with him. All right. Ephesians 2, whole chapter, but just a couple verses, 11-13, says, therefore, remember your former state. See that? Your former state, not your current state, your former state. You Gentiles by birth, called the uncircumcised by those who, because of the operation of their flesh, are called the circumcised. At that time, you had no Messiah. You were estranged from the national life of Israel, from the commonwealth of Israel. You were foreigners to the covenants embodying God's promise. You were in this world without hope and without God. But now you who were once far off have been brought near through the shedding of Messiah's blood. So you who were once far off in Messiah Yeshua are now brought near to what? You say, not what, who? Brought near to God. Okay, yes, I'll give you that. Absolutely, brought near to Yahweh. But in this text, he says you were estranged and far and removed from specific things. And he says, through the blood of Messiah, you who were far are now brought near. So according to this text, you had no Messiah. You were estranged from the commonwealth of Israel. So in Messiah, you are now brought near to the commonwealth of Israel. You are foreigners to the covenants embodying God's promise, meaning you are no longer foreigner to covenant, but you are part of the covenant which has God's promise, and you were in the world without hope and without God. So now you have hope, and now you are with him. See, it's a change of not just who you are partially. It's a change of who you are all the way around. Every part of you. You're different. You've changed. All right, you are literally something new. In Ezekiel 47:21 says this, so you shall divide the land according to the tribes of Israel. You shall allot it as an inheritance for yourselves and for the sojourners who reside among you and have children among you. They shall be to you as native-born children of Israel. With you they shall be allotted an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. And in whatever tribe the sojourner resides, there you shall assign him his inheritance, declares the Lord God. So again, coming along and joining with the people of Israel, you are just like one who was born in Israel. And it's that way even in a time yet to come. Okay, so what happens here, Moshe tells the people, so you're going to go into the land. This is how Yahweh desires for you to live. But when you go into the land, you're not going to do it. Things are going to happen. You're not going to do what you're supposed to do, and you will be exiled because of it. So he prophesies exile, and then he says something interesting. He says, the people will ask why Yahweh has treated the people so bad. But here's the deal. They forsook the word of Yahweh. They walked contrary to Yahweh and his teachings, and Moshe warns them that if they break covenant, then they would receive desolation, exile, curses, and captivity. But isn't this the way people are? People ignore Yahweh, ignore his word, bad things happen. And then people say, well, why is God treating his people so badly? When we live in a world when most people don't listen to Yahweh or don't care what his word says. It's tough. You can't blame Yahweh for us not listening to him. We do have our choices to make. That's why he says, I've set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Choose life. We have those choices to make. All right. And because of those choices, sometimes we make wrong ones. And sometimes others make wrong ones. And until we truly 100% are all submitted to Yahweh, it's not a perfect world. But there's a day coming, right? We'll talk about that some other time. But going on here, you are affirming covenant. And if you walk away from the covenant, then it produces exile. Okay, so even like back at the beginning of Gan Eden, right? He told Adam, if you partake of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you'll die. Well, that was equated with exile from the garden and exile from the presence of Yahweh. So this plan of getting the people to return to paradise, if you will, to return to Yahweh, and so if disobedience caused exile, what is expected of us on our return? Obedience. Okay. Let's take a look at a few things, though. There is hope, right? Deuteronomy 29:24 says, all the nations will say, why has Yahweh done this to the land, and what caused the heat of this great anger? Then the people will say, it is because they abandoned the covenant of Yahweh, the God of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt, and went down and served other gods and worshipped them, gods whom they had not known and he had not allotted to them. So what happens here is why is God treating the people so bad? It's like, wait a minute, no, that's not the case. The case is they walked away from his covenant. All right, and then what happens? Well, that's going to produce exile. But in the saying they're going to be exiled, we have a promise of return. Okay, Deuteronomy 29:28. So Yahweh uprooted them from their land in anger and fury, great wrath, and cast them into another land as they are this day. And the secret things belong to Yahweh our God, but the things that are revealed belong to us and our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. So we have the secret things. Satar is the word for secret things, which means something that is covered over. Doesn't mean it's not there. It's just covered over. You don't see it. It's there. You just don't see it. But then the things that are revealed belong to Yahweh, or the things that are revealed belong to us and our children, that we may walk in it. Well, this word for reveal is also related to the word of exile. So we have things that were exiled that are waiting for a place of return, because we're looking at the things that belong to us. How do we do this? We return to him and walk in his ways. But on this idea of they were exiled and they were cast into, in Deuteronomy 29:28, they were cast into another land, is the Hebrew word vayashlachem. Vayashlachem. If you look at a Torah scroll, you will see the word vayashlachem from the word shalach. The shalach is a shin, lamed, and kuf. And so we have the shalach, and the lamed is enlarged. Okay, so the lamed is enlarged. Okay, so again, shin, lamed, kaf, and the lamed is enlarged than all the other letters if you look at a Torah scroll. So what are we looking at here? All right. So the lamed means a shepherd's staff, much like the staff of Moses was used to lead the children of Israel out of Mitzrayim. The staff of Moshe raised up in the wilderness to symbolize how the Messiah would be raised up on the cross. We see a lot of things related to the shepherd and a staff. Okay. The letter lamed is made bold to remind us that the great shepherd will be the one who gathers us wherever we may be scattered. So we have in the word, and they were cast into, this word for cast into is also scattered or sown, like you sow into the ground, right? So they were sown into another land as they are this day. But we have in this promise, the great shepherd will be one to gather us back in. See that? So though we were scattered, we will be gathered by the great shepherd. Let's go back to Deuteronomy 4:27-30. Yahweh shall scatter you among the nations, and you shall be left few in number among the heathen, where Yahweh shall lead you. And there you shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But if from there you shall seek Yahweh your God, you will find him, if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. So when you are in tribulation, look at verse 30 very carefully. When you are in tribulation, and these things come upon you in the latter days, or in the last days, you turn to Yahweh your God and be obedient to his voice. So again, we're talking about restoration, but we're talking about a time of tribulation in the last days, returning to Yahweh and being obedient to him, listening to his voice, keeping his words. So he says, I will scatter you, but I will regather you back. And when you do, keep my word, right? Let's look at this. Ezekiel 34, 12 and 13. As a shepherd seeks out his flock in the day that he is among his sheep that are scattered, so will I seek out my sheep. Why? Because his sheep have been scattered. And I will deliver them out of all the places where they have been scattered on the cloudy and dark day. And I will bring them out from the people and gather them from the countries and bring them to their own land and feed them upon the mountains of Israel by the rivers and in all the inhabited places of the country. See that? He is our great shepherd. And we know Yeshua is our great shepherd. So in Yeshua, he will bring in all those that have been scattered and all those who will be joined with them. I could talk about the dry bones going on there, the dry bones, the two sticks. I'm not really going to talk about them today, but that is a picture that's there. Okay. And we can even relate the dry bones and the two sticks together with Psalm 22, which talks about Yeshua and on the cross and him gathering the people in and all that talking about. Okay, so there's a lot there. Okay, but continuing on with our good shepherd, Jeremiah 50 verse 6, my people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have caused them to go astray. They have turned away on the mountains, and they have gone from mountain to hill, and they have forgotten their resting place. Matthew 15:24, Yeshua says, I am not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Matthew 10:6 and 7, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and as you go, preach, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Deuteronomy 30 verse 4 says, if your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of the heaven, which kind of implies that's where they're going to be, they're going to be far reaching and far out. From there, Yahweh your God will gather you, and from there he will take you. Now, this is another interesting note. It says, from there he will gather you. Okay, so from there, Yahweh your God will gather you. This reads in the Hebrew, right? So here we go. In the Hebrew, it reads, Yekavetzcha Yahweh Elohecha. So this first word I'm going to look at here is kavetz. This is from the word kavatz. Kavatz, which is an interesting word when it says to gather you, kavatz. Interesting word for gather here. In the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament, there's some good references that has to say on this and some good explanations and definitions. Let's talk about them really quick. So kavatz is to gather or to assemble. And he says, God pledges to assemble his people from the places where he had scattered them during the great exile. This promise is repeatedly recalled by the prophets. An example, Isaiah 11:12, which says he will raise a signal for the nations and will assemble the banished of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. See that? So again, Isaiah 11:12 is talking about something being raised up that is a sign for the nations, and he will gather in and assemble Israel from the four corners of the earth. Continuing on, and the eschaton of this divine gathering is to extend to all peoples, from Isaiah 66:18, and even the Gentiles, which we saw in Isaiah 11:12. So Isaiah 66:18 reads, for I know their works and their thoughts, and the time is coming to gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. Moving on, it says, by so accomplishing such a clear prophecy, God exhibits his sovereignty and therefore sanctifies himself to those gathered, which we see in Ezekiel 20, verse 41, where it says, as a pleasing aroma, I will accept you when I bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of the countries where you have been scattered, and I will manifest my holiness among you in the sight of the nations. So after the return, God tells his people to remember his promises. We see in Nehemiah 1:9, but in Nehemiah 1 verses 8 and 9, it reads, remember the word that you commanded your servant Moshe, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of the heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen and make my name dwell there. What we see here is that Yeshua says he came to gather the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He came to gather the exiles. He came to gather all people together as one people, one nation, one people of covenant. And again, we saw this back in Isaiah 11, verses 11 and 12, which we read. He is that banner that is lifted up for the nations. And when he will assemble all of Israel and gather the scattered of Judah from the four corners of the earth. We also see in Psalm 147:2, it says, Adonai builds up Yerushalayim. He gathers together the exiles of Israel. Jeremiah 29:13 and 14 says, you will seek me and find me when you search me with all your heart, and I will be found by you, says Adonai, and I will return you from exile and gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, says Adonai, and I will bring you back to the place from which I removed you as captives into exile. Matthew 15:24 says, Yeshua says, I was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. In John 10:27, we see that my sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. John 11, really, really big one here. Remember, people were having a fit because they said, what are we going to do with this guy Yeshua? If he continues on, all will believe in him, all will do that, and then it's really going to be a problem for us, right? There's some interesting things that were going on here. Caiaphas was a high priest that year, and Caiaphas has some interesting things to say that he understood because of his position as a high priest. In John 11, verses 50 to 52, says, do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, that the whole nation should perish? He did not say this of his own accord, but being the high priest that year, he prophesied, see this, that Yeshua would die for the nation. Look at verse 52, but not for that nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. See this? The emphasis here, he was prophesied that Yeshua would gather those from the nations and gather those that are scattered abroad into one. And this word that's used here, he says to gather, is the Greek word sunego, but the related Hebrew words from the Septuagint is kavatz and asaph. Kavatz and asaph. Because of kavatz we've already talked about, but asaph is where we get the word Yosef. Yosef. Asaph means to add or to gather in together. Yosef being one of the sons of Israel. And if you go back and read the prophecies regarding Yosef, who also the blessing of Israel to Ephraim, Yosef's son, younger son, and all these relating to restoration, the scattering of Israel, the kingdom being split in two, and all the people coming back. Most of the prophets talked about the bringing in all Israel, bringing back in together. It's the biggest part of prophecy in the Tanakh, but it's not really talked about very much. But it needs to be. It needs to be. Genesis 49:1. Yaakov calls his sons together. He said, gather yourselves together, and that I may tell you that which will befall you in the last days. This is interesting. So he calls his sons together. He says, gather yourselves together. That's asaph. What he says is to gather together. Ha'asfu, which is from the word asaph, which means to gathering together, and where we get the word for Yosef. So gathering together, assemble, bring yourselves together, that I may tell you what will happen in the Ba'acharit Hayamim, in the last days. Interesting things happening here. He says in the last days, or in the end days. What's going to happen? He says, you will gather yourselves together. Gather yourselves together. For Genesis 49:2. Gather yourselves together. It's kavatz. And hear, you sons of Jacob, and hearken to Israel, your father. Hearken to Israel, Avechem, your father. So in the last days, we have a picture of all the people gathering themselves together into one, and to listen to Israel, who was their father? Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, who became Israel, who became the 12 tribes, and all those grafted in with them. So in the last days, we will all come back in together and hear the words that Yahweh gave to Israel for an inheritance, for generation to generation, to receive his words within us so that we can have them written on our hearts and to follow through in our relationship and life with Yeshua because of it. It's amazing how it all comes in together, guys. It's really just some amazing things to get into and look at it. Well, Guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope that this has been a blessing to you. I hope it's been encouraging. I hope it's been challenging for you as well. And if this has been a blessing, please share that on whatever avenue that you listen or watch or whatever it is. Please share these teachings because it helps get them out there. And if this has been a blessing to you, please consider making a donation to this as well, because that's how we keep these things moving forward. It's because of you guys who are listening and you who give to help continue to do that. If you're not in a place where you can do that, please continue to pray that we keep these teachings going out there and support us by your prayers, okay? So that's all we have for you today, guys. So until next time, be blessed, be a blessing, and shalom.